Hey, this is Kat. I'm with Georgianna. And we were talking about the issue with homelessness because it's a huge problem in not only Los Angeles, but also in America. And we're in New York right now, and Georgianna has some wisdom she'd like to share about homelessness. What's one of your biggest points?
Well, for me, when I was homeless for 2 years. I never identified with being homeless. I always removed myself from the situation and realized and said that it was temporary. And as long as that you accept and identify as being homeless, you will remain homeless because that's your identity. And so that's what I take out of it. Every time I see somebody on the street and I see them laying on the street, I realize that that person has accepted that they are homeless, because there are other means that is available, but their spirit is so broken that they are willing to stay on the streets. So I normally just wish them well, say a prayer for them, or try to see if I can, if they are open to help. If they are, I will give them some directions. If they are closed, I just say a prayer and move on.
Yeah.
And that's what I have to take away from my experience. I encountered 2 incidents when I was homeless. There was a couple that was homeless for like 10 years when I was about to become homeless.
Right.
I became homeless for 2 years, so that's 2 more extra years so that was 12 years. It's like about 7 years since I left that, and they're still homeless, so that's like 19 years they've been homeless. And I reached out to them and I tried to speak to them, and I realized they were closed because the reasons they were giving me why they couldn't go to the shelter, they were not reasons, they were just basic things that you had to do. But I had a couple of incidents when I went to a couple of private shelters, and I do understand why people will not go to certain shelters, because when you get there, some of them treat you like you are nothing. And so I was at a private shelter, and I remember one lady said to me she wanted me to remember that I was homeless, and I said to her, this is just temporary. But this was a very private shelter. They were telling me that I would be able to get a full court because it's highly connected. But what they were doing, they were breaking my spirit. And so one morning, I got up and I left that shelter with 25 cents in my pocket, and I walked from 70-something street to 50-something street in the cold because they were breaking my spirit. And if my spirit was broken, then I would never get out of homelessness. So everybody that is on the streets right now that have accepted and are sleeping on the street, these are people that have broken. And I do believe that the way you are treated in the shelter, depending on which shelter you go to, defines if your spirit gets broken.
That's a very, very good point. And the other thing is like, I don't know if I said it earlier because there's so much stuff in my mind right now, but LA has this situation going on where even the New York Post did a story about it. There's homeless people. Everyone knows there's homeless people in LA because it's warmer weather, but also in downtown Los Angeles, there's lots of tents, and the people are living on the street and they're throwing their refuse in the street, their bathroom waste, there's rats, they're worried about typhoid fever. Literally a plague is happening because these tent cities have been allowed to grow, and there's a lot of addiction issues down there. There's a police station right there. There's also a lot of the fashion district is there, and the toy district is over there, and then there's also some gentrification because a lot of rich people are moving down there to stay in the old warehouses and converting them to living spaces. So you have this extreme disconnect between very wealthy and the poor, and then also people with mental issues. So the same thing is happening all over, but in different variations. They may not have like typhoid fever, but the growing problem with homelessness and mental illness and addiction and depression is going to have effects on all of us, because when people are hungry and desperate, you know, crime raises, you know what I'm saying? So if someone finds themselves homeless, what's the first 3 things they should do?
But for me, from my experience, I had been to 2 private shelters, and I actually went to my last choice after 2 years. I went to a public shelter, and what I experienced was a paradox. In the public shelter, the government comes in and checks. 1. 2, most of these people are qualified to work with you. They went to school.
Right.
In the private sector, there's no regulation. So anybody will
hold on, just talk louder.
Anybody will open up a shelter, I guess, be able to get anybody that is not qualified or educated to work with you. And my 2 private shelters, they were shelters. They were drop-in shelters and shelters, but they were not qualified to work with human beings that was going through depression or going through something. And it was as if there was one head, and one head that was not qualified to work with people that was broken. Because if somebody is broken, you cannot deal with them by diminishing their self-esteem. And that is one of the things people need to look at. When we are going through issues where we cannot work and maintain ourselves, there's a lot of emotions involved. Nobody wants to be homeless. Nobody wants to be out on the street. They're at this point and they're coming to you for help. And most of the people you go to that work in these jobs, they are not qualified. Not with the educational, but with the emotional support that person needs.
Well, you need you need like some, I don't want to say therapy, but you need someone with psychiatric or psychological background that's going to be able to help a person who's depressed.
But you also need somebody that is empathetic.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Because if you don't have somebody that is empathetic, then you can just turn away and never go back, which is what I experienced with the couple that I realized it's 19 years they're on the streets, or 20 years. And it's because every time they went, there was an issue. Somebody treated them badly, and so now they have a mental block towards going for help.
Yeah, it's hard for them to trust and to try one more time.
Yes, so the people that are working with homeless people, they need to be a little bit more empathetic. Just imagine you not being able to be able to provide for yourself.
Trust me, I've been there.
And you have to go to somebody, and when you got there, what do you want? What does that tell you?
Honey, I got robbed. So I had people treating me like absolute shit, whether it be the police or the victim's assistant program, or I don't want to say people that I knew who knew me that didn't get what was going on, because it's very traumatic, and when you have a trauma, you're not maybe communicating in the normal way that regular people are communicating. So they're attacking you because you're not smiling all the time, you're not happy all the time, because you're dealing with trauma. And I find it very distressing that we are so full of that social media reality show fakeness that people can't even be truthful about their emotion. If they're scared, if they're unhappy, if they're depressed, it's like the world wants to see a fake smile. And if you can't always give what people expect you to be. You can only be what you are. And I can only imagine someone having the courage to go to a homeless shelter and saying, I need help, and then someone treating them like a piece of shit. How heartbreaking is that?
I will say that at my private shelters, it was not good. I literally had to run away from both of them. But my public shelters, I will say that I got help from the beginning. My first counselor, which was Miss Harris, she encouraged me and she helped me a lot. Then I moved to a women's shelter, and everybody there, because I was willing to put in the work, everybody helped me move on.
Right.
But you do have some people that are there that I saw with my own two eyes that were not willing to go look for a job. And there was a TV on, and they literally had to turn the TV off in the morning and have it go on in the afternoon at 12 and at nighttime for news, because if not, they would just sit down there for the whole day. And so when I got to the shelter, within a month, 2 months, I had enough money saved up for my own place.
Wow.
Whilst you had people that had been there for a year or for 3 years. And so, while that shelter, there were people that was willing to help me because I helped myself. I got a job within less than a week of being there, and they asked me, which is how the shelter works, you're supposed to save 20% towards your deposit. First month's rent, first month's deposit. I had the option of going to public service for one-shot deal. I chose not to take that. I chose to save up my money, and I would give more than 60% because my goal was to move out. And people say, I asked them, how long does it take for you to get out of it? And they said sometimes somebody comes and within a month they're out. They help you move on, but you have to
do the work, right?
And some people, because I'll never forget, I lived in the shelter and I left to go to work, and then I saw this other lady that I was in the shelter with, and she was on the side begging, and I said, hello, how are you? And then I moved on, I went to work. And
yeah.
I will tell you, most of the people that I saw begging, with the exception for that one, they were not homeless. They were not homeless.
You know, it's funny though.
They were just trying to make an easy buck.
Right. And that the easy buck, whether you're homeless or you're doing something that's against your moral aptitude, is the same. That fast, easy money. But you know what happens to people who actually have jobs, or not just jobs, but let's just say some catastrophe happens, or you don't get paid, or if you're in an abusive relationship and you have to leave. Some of us don't have the, I don't know how to say this. We either have so much shame that we could never go to a homeless shelter even if we needed it.
It's not shame.
No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying in reference to someone like me.
Some of them, no, I'm saying they don't have the humility, because it's humbling to go to a shelter.
Right.
And I will say that the reason why I did not, because I spent 2 years running around, I didn't go to a shelter was because of fear of what happened. What would happen, because you hear all of these stories. But I met some of the best people in the shelter, and some of us stayed in touch, and it was humbling. But when you got to go ask for help, because if you've been working all of your life paying your bills, and then you get to a point where you can't, it's difficult to go walk into a shelter with a bunch of strangers sleeping in the same room with you. But I was fortunate when I went to my public shelter and even my private shelter. The women that were there were just people on the same level as me that had worked all their lives but had encountered some problems.
Right.
And we became friends.
Right.
We stayed in touch with each other. We stayed away from troublemakers, and we moved on.
And that's commendable. Can I just say something, because it's kind of an interesting similarity, but to the being homeless. One of my everyone knows I'm a photographer, videographer, journalist, but when I come to New York, one of my agents was like, "Oh, so are you staying at a hotel, or are you staying at the Y?" And the Y costs like $149 a night, even though it's a small like it looks like a closet, your room, right? And anything close in like 15, like around, we're in Central Park right now, but anything close to Central Park or in the city of Manhattan costs more than if you're further out. And I'm like, no, I'm not paying $149 for the YMCA, because a lot of people just don't even know how expensive it is to live in New York and to work in New York and in Manhattan. And so I'm staying at hostels. And when I explain to people what hostels are, you'd be surprised how many people don't even know what hostels are. And it turns out a hostel, some of the rooms are similar to a homeless shelter. You have multiple beds in a room, except we pay every night. But when I explained it to some people working on a movie, they asked me the same questions that you probably, the fear that people had about going to a homeless shelter, like, is it safe? What happens to your stuff? You know, is it, you know, all the stuff. It's the same thing, but it's like people don't realize there's like a disconnect of what reality is. It's very expensive to live here, and if you're trying to save money, and if you're visiting or something like that, one of the ways to save money is to share rooms at the hostels or to share a room in someone's apartment. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm in the big picture, there's a false narrative, whether it be actually staying in a shelter or being in a hostel. But regardless of which, if people are trying to do the best they can, save money, and get their shit together, why are people hating?
Well, what I will say pertaining to that is, yes, I did have a fear. Because it's a big setting, there's a lot of different women, different emotions and going through. But what I did realize is that we watched out for each other.
That's great.
Because we had it was a big room with like about, maybe I would say 8 women or 9 women. It was the biggest, and one day we came and they had split us all up, and then I'm getting this call, where are you? And then another call, where are you? And there was this young lady that she wasn't well,
right,
and so we would literally have to get up in the middle of the night to go take showers, because she would just come and stay and just stay at us and watch us. And so everybody knew that they had to take showers in the nighttime and watch out at the bathroom door, just in case she was coming. So we started watching out for each other, and we kind of became a family. We kept each other's numbers. Some of them I've lost touch with, but they were some of the best people.
Yeah, I know, but that's what's interesting too. It's the same thing at the hostel. Is like in certain rooms you meet people and you talk, and you look out for each other, you know what I'm saying? And that's what it's about. And the big picture about this whole thing is about us looking out for each other and having compassion and being decent. Yeah, empathetic and being decent human beings. You know what I mean? But all of us, that's what it blows my mind that people can be so cruel when people are busting their butt, doing the best they can do, working multiple jobs, and trying to live their dreams, and people are making fun of them because they got multiple jobs or they're going after their passion. And it may not be that white picket fence, it may not be that whatever that scenario is that the other people have brainwashed in their mind, but if a person is working hard and doing the best they can, leave them alone.
Well, all I have to say, if you are following your passion, there will be obstacles. Just keep at it, because eventually there will be the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Well, that's a good place to leave this on. Thank you so much, Georgianna, and hopefully we will talk again about solving some of the challenges of this homeless issue. But I think just by talking about it and sharing, you know, it helps, because it can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody. And if you're in an abusive relationship and you feel like you got to stay, leave. And if you have to go to a homeless shelter, go to a homeless shelter. You know,
Safe Horizons is the one for people with abusive relationships. It's different
in every city, in every state. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, you can look it up, and you know, yeah, that's good though. But thank you again.